Hey everyone, my new Minute here. Typically, I try to do my This Week in Batman on Tuesdays. This week, you're going to get it on Friday.
Hey everyone, Minutia Minute here. Just finished editing this week's movie rewind video. Just going through, doing just a quick proofread check, make sure I cut everything right and don't have too many ahs and ums in it. I am so excited to get into last week's Batman books. I've got my books right here ready to go. So the clock on my computer is actually 2 hours off. It's actually a little bit after 8 o'clock. I have to be up at 4 for work tomorrow morning, so I don't have a ton of time, but I am excited to get started catching up on last week's books. Sit down, read a couple books, give you my thoughts, and get this review rolling. Okay, so I know you guys have all been wondering, what came out last week in Batman? Well, I think I picked up everything again this week, much to my dismay, as I'm trying to cut back on Batman books, but there's just too many books I'm interested in reading. So, last week we finished out Fear State, with the exception of Fear State Omega, which comes out technically tomorrow, although when you see this video it'll already be out. So all we had were some tie-in wrap-ups from last week. We got Catwoman 37, we got Harley Quinn number 9, and we got Batman Detective Comics 1045. As far as tie-ins go, hopefully ending on a high note, because I really like Catwoman and I really like Detective. Harley Quinn, not my favorite, but it hasn't been the worst thing ever. As far as non-Fear State books, we got Robin issue number 8, which has been really ramping up the last few issues. I'm really excited to give this a read. We got the second issue of Task Force Z, which I am excited to give a read. The first issue was very intriguing. It was fun. It was kind of a like, why does this book exist? But you weren't mad at it because it was a fun read. So hopefully this continues and we get a little bit more to dig into with the second issue. And then probably the book I was most excited for last week, Batman Reptilian number 6. I've got issue 5 in the hopper, and I'm going to give both of these a read. Won't be reviewing this in this video, but I am going to be reviewing some non-canonical Batman series in the near future in a different video, which will definitely include my thoughts on Batman Reptilian, so be sure to be on the lookout for that. So then the real question is what to read first. I don't have a ton of time because I have to get to bed. So the question is, do I focus on probably the chore that is going to be finishing up Fear State and save the books I'm really excited for later? Or do I start with the books I'm really excited about and wrap up my day on a high note? I'm definitely someone who likes to eat my peas and carrots first. So we're going to kick things off with Harley Quinn issue 9 and get this out of the way, and on to bigger, brighter, more exciting reads after that. Okay, a little bit of live play-by-play. This book opens with a recap of how Harley Quinn became Harley Quinn. People complain about seeing the origin of Batman too often. I'm waiting to hear people complain about seeing the origin of Harley Quinn too often. It seems like anytime you're putting Harley Quinn in an issue, you always open the book with this context, which at this point should not be necessary. Alright, so Harley Quinn number 9. It was alright. These Fear State tie-ins I felt like have been kind of all over the place. It's wrapping up, presumably kind of in the lead up to the big conclusion that happens in Batman. But we've already gotten that. And so this feels very superfluous. I would say probably the highlight of it, as usual, actually, I've said this before, is Kevin. I think Kevin is an interesting character, and we get to spend a little bit of time with him, dealing with people's perceptions of him and him trying to grow into his own, holding off Keepsake I particularly liked this splash page with the, Angel Harley and Devil Harley on it. I thought that was kind of cool. I would say actually throughout this whole book, I was kind of impressed by the layouts, just in general. I'm, again, not a fan of the art, but the way this book is laid out, I thought was better than usual, or maybe I just noticed it more this time, because I felt like it flowed pretty well. There's one point where they use arrows to point you from one panel to the other. I think that's a sign of a poorly laid out book normally, but I actually thought that the arrows were unnecessary and actually maybe just a poor editorial decision more so than poorly laid out decision. But yeah, just a lot of surprisingly decent layouts. I guess that's the nice thing I'm going to say about Harley Quinn number 9, because I usually try to find some kind of a positive. As far as a read, like, I don't know, skip it. It really felt more like a tone poem about Harley Quinn and her relationship with Ivy and Kevin and his relationship with Sam. Now, since Harley Quinn, Poison Ivy, and Catwoman have all been relatively closely tied together in this whole Fear State event, I think it's only appropriate we go on to Ram V's Catwoman with issue number 37. This particular issue had kind of a great cover. Like, I really enjoy the greens and the fluorescence of it, with it being Yannick Paquette and the sort of Swamp Thing tie-ins we got in that Gardner issue. It kind of seems like an appropriate choice for Catwoman 37 anyway. It was really interesting reading this back to back from this, because there's actually some really interesting parallels going on between these two books. In Harley Quinn, she's kind of assembled this ragtag team of D-listers to go up against the Council of Chaos, or I can't remember what they call, but basically a bunch of D-listers going after a bunch of D-list villains and kind of duking it out in the background of this whole Fear State event. It doesn't work, partly because the whole payoff of the book is basically getting to the Harley and Ivy moment that's already been seen in Fear State. Now, on the flip side, you have Catwoman, where you have Catwoman, Riddler, Harley, Clayface, Cheshire, all working together against a bunch of B-list villains. The characters drawn in this are just a lot more interesting. They do a much better job setting them up, making you kind of interested in them, and then paying the whole thing off in this issue. Everything in this ultimately is a diversion. So, you're working under the premise that they're trying to get Poison Ivy to reunite with Queen Ivy, which you see in the main Batman Fear State title. But what you find out halfway through the book is that the Riddler is about to betray Catwoman and prevent that from happening, but she's already seen that coming, and Poison Ivy is actually just good old Clayface in disguise. And so ultimately you're resolving kind of a completely different story than what you think you're resolving, and you're actually getting into the meat and potatoes of the fallout from Joker War, actually, and kind of the final word on the Penguin, Catwoman, Riddler trifecta that was set up earlier in James Tynion's run. This book has just been a joy to read, to be honest. Even with the fill-in artist, I found the fill-in art to be very competent, not as good as the regular artist, but still excellent. And I'm really excited to see what's next. I know Ram V is on at least for another issue, and I really hope that he gets to continue on with Catwoman, because he's done just such a great job making me care about a book that I've never really given the time of day to. So 2 books down, it took about 45 minutes to get through everything, just because I like to kind of go slow, look at the pictures. You see the abridged version when I'm reading these for the camera. But I definitely got to start getting ready for bed and gearing up for work tomorrow. So I will pop back tomorrow after work and get through a couple more of these books. After work tomorrow, I'll hit the comic book shop, get the current week's books, and then head back here, hunker down, and see if I can't get through the next 3 books from last week, so I'm ready to wrap up this week's books Wednesday, Thursday, and get this video wrapped up for you guys.
It was a long day at work. I ended up having to work late. So I'm not making it to the comic book shop now until literally like an hour before they close. But I'm going to head up there right now and see if they've got the books that I need, crossing my fingers that I don't need to pick up any books tomorrow. Worst case, my wife actually works pretty close to the alternate comic book shop that I get some of my backup books from. So that'll help, but I'm hoping I can save her the trip and I can save myself the anxiety, and the source has all the books that I need. I am just skeptical because it seems like if I'm not there at store open, they're at least missing one of the books that I need. So we'll find out.
Alright folks, made it back from the comic book shop, and I got a stack of books. Unfortunately they didn't have everything, which is, to be honest, super frustrating. So I was able to pick up Detective Comics Annual 2021, Batman Annual 2021, the Robin Annual 2021, the Joker Annual 2021, the Nightwing Annual 2021, and then Batman the Detective 6 of 6. Now, what's missing in here? Well, the big book this week, as far as Batman goes, is Batman Fear State Omega. Local comic book shop was out of it. I'm getting frustrated with this comic shop. And, I get it, like, comic book shops in general, like, it's a small business. I would say this particular comic book shop, though, like, it's a huge store. They got tons of comics. I understand that it's hard to, like, know how much to order, but the place where I get frustrated is I come in, I check for the book, it's not on the shelf, I ask somebody, and then you get the 20-minute explanation of, well, you gotta make sure you get here early because these books are just extremely hot, and blah, 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 just like constant, and like you can't get a word in edgewise. They just want to tell you about how it's your fault that they didn't have the book that you needed. And the thing is, there's a lot of different comic book shops in the area. This is just the shop that's close. It's the biggest comic book shop, and yet I go to any number of other smaller comic book shops in the area, and I never have this problem. The fact of the matter is they're just not ordering enough books. They used to have someone who always did all of their ordering, and there was never a problem. Rest in peace. That person passed away like 5 years ago, and they've never been able to like figure it out. And I don't know, after 5 years, like I'm just at a point where I'm just kind of getting pissed off. But the reality is my favorite comic book shop moved. They used to be a lot closer. Now they're basically like 4 suburbs away, and it's like a 40-minute drive to get down there, and it's just not worth that extra effort to go down there unless I really have to. So like I said, thankfully my wife works close by that shop. She's agreed to go get the books that I need. So I need to get Batman Fear State Omega #1. I'm trying to decide if I'm going to get the Gotham Villain Special. The fact of the matter is, like, if you're reading Batman, this is an insanely expensive week. Like, these books did not all launch in December. So why is every single Batman title getting their annual today? Like, it would be nice if they spread these things out, but of course it's like media blitz. You gotta get all of them out and charge $5.99 a piece for them, and then oops, it's an anniversary for the Scarecrow or whatever, and so you've gotta get all of those in their big giant special that I'm assuming is like $10 or whatever. So I'm feeling kind of bitter, if you can't tell. I'm gonna sleep on it, and if they have cover A at the other local shop, then I'll probably pick it up. I'm on the fence. They did actually have a couple copies of it at the shop I was just at now. It was just all like cover B, cover C, cover D, whatever. There's like a bunch of different covers for it, and that was enough for me to say, nah, I don't want it. So we'll see if I'm still feeling this way tomorrow. I might just skip that one. But in the meantime, you can tell I'm stressed. It's been a long day at work, and I've had a lot to do. I was late getting to the comic book shop, and I'm just kind of grumpy. So I'm just going to kick back and relax. I've still got 3 books from last week to power through. So I'm going to peruse through these, start formulating my thoughts, and hopefully just kick back and enjoy the last couple hours of my night. Hey guys, it's now Wednesday night. Last night I was able to get through the last 3 books from last week's comic run. I read through Robin, Detective Comics, and Task Force Z. Thankfully, I was able to make it home a little bit early. Not early enough to actually see any sunlight, which is kind of a bummer, but so it goes. That's life in Minnesota in the winter. I really need to get out today and get some exercise, so I am changing into my running gear and going to take a nighttime run. Wife will be home a little bit later. We're going to watch *Malignant*. She didn't get to see that when it was on HBO Max, so I'm really excited to watch that with her. At some point tonight, I'll pop back on and review those 3 books. And then Thursday, I'm going to have to hit the ground running hard because I was going through looking with all of those annuals. I've got like 200 plus pages of Batman to read, plus the books that my wife is picking up for me tonight, being the Villain Special and Fear State Omega, both of which is going to probably add another 140 pages. So we're looking at 340 pages a book to get through. Kind of a crazy week to do a double episode, but hang in there. We'll get a couple reviews down tonight. I'll see if I can get into reading any of the books, although probably not, just because of the plans I've already got going. But we'll just have to see how the night goes. Hey everyone. No, this has not randomly become an episode of Movie Rewind. I am in the basement right now because I'm just trying to be quiet. My wife already went to bed. We watched *Malignant* tonight, which she got a big kick out of it. If you haven't seen it, I do recommend checking it out. It's a schlock fest, but it's pretty fun. And I just wanted to get these couple reviews in the can so that I have a little bit of time to edit them tomorrow. The plan is, at this moment, for the video to post Friday at 6 p.m., hell or high water. So there were 3 books I didn't get to review for you guys on Monday night, but I did get to read them last night and start putting my thoughts together. So in no particular order, we'll start with Robin, number 8. This is a book that I have been singing the praises of month to month whenever this is coming out. It just feels like a fresh, fun, creative story that every single issue they seem to find a way to up the stakes. And we've gotten to this point where now we've learned that Lazarus Island is basically a giant Lazarus pit, and they are sacrificing these children's lives in order to bring about some kind of a demon that is going to spawn in the Lazarus pit and come to life, which after a protracted battle between Damien and Connor in this, that's basically precisely what happens. I think that really the high point of this book is seeing Damien get killed a second time, which when you have the big throwdown between Connor and Damien, there's always that question of who wins, and it's pretty decisive that Connor Hawke literally executes Damien. There is a little bit of a twist at the end, which is that Damien was using that opportunity to basically get reincarnated and basically be refreshed without any injuries going into the coming battle with the demon that ends up getting unleashed basically at the very end of the book. So this, as always, is a lot of fun to read. I mean, it's just very consistent. Joshua Williamson writing and Gleb Malenkov as the artist on every issue of this, I'm pretty sure. And so I really can't wait to see what's next. And I'm actually pretty excited to read the Robin Annual that came out this week and see how it ties into the greater goings-on of Lazarus Island. So after reading Robin, I sat down and read Task Force Z issue number 2. This is written by Matthew Rosenberg with Eddie Barrows on pencils. They worked together on the Cheer storyline in Batman Urban Legends, which, well, it started kind of weak for me. I really came to enjoy that series overall as it was wrapping up, and so it's cool to see them teamed up again here. I think they actually make a pretty great pair. And this is a book, I said last week as well, where it's just like this odd team-up book where you've got all these sort of undead DC supervillains. Red Hood is now the leader of this ragtag group, obviously known as Task Force Z. And basically all they're really working on right now is assembling the team. The core gist of the book 2 is him going out and recruiting a new team member, which at the end you find out is none other than Deadshot brought back to life. So it's just the ultimate like WTF book. Like I don't know where this is going and where this idea came from. If this is like a pet project from Matthew Rosenberg, or if this has like some kind of greater connotation in the DC universe right now. They're just recognizing a lot of like pretty heavy hitter DC characters that are currently dead, and bringing them back in this kind of obtuse way and throwing Red Hood in there. This book's got a lot of comedy. I laughed out loud multiple times. It's got great art by Eddie Barrows. And so as a result, it's just kind of a fun roller coaster, like just nothing super heavy. And like I said, just a book that feels sort of oddly out of step with a lot of the other stuff I've been reading with DC. So I am definitely recommending Task Force Z 2 issues in. The quality is consistent, and I'm genuinely quite excited to see where issue 3 goes and what's going to happen once this task force is fully assembled. So then finally, that just leaves Batman and Detective Comics. This is issue number 1045, in which we get the wrap-up to the Mayor Nakano element of the Fear State storyline, and then we get a backup story called Arkham Rising on the cover, although when you get into the issue, it's actually called Foundations. Basically, you get the tail end of Fear State, coupled with the beginning of this upcoming Arkham Tower storyline that's going to be going in the main Detective Comics book after this issue. And this is another case where, as I've said before, Detective Comics has definitely found a niche of its own, and is probably a book that I'm month to month more excited to read than the main Batman title. I think I prefer Dan Mora on art than I do Jorge Jimenez, although these last couple issues have felt a little bit rushed compared to some of Dan Mora's other work on Batman. But all in all, still really good. It's had this fun storyline with Vile and the fallout from that. Just very different than sort of the typical Batman stories that we've been getting over the last few years. And to top it off, Mariko Tamaki's been doing a really good job of building up the greater Batman universe. Having Mayor Nakano be such an integral part of this story, and seeing even over these last couple of issues how they've had to learn to work together despite the fact that they don't see eye to eye on the future of the city. You've got that reporter who Deb Donovan, I always forget her name, the reporter Deb Donovan, who I think is just a really great supporting Batman character, kind of in the vein of like the old days with Montoya or Bullock or like those types of characters. Which we don't get that much of anymore because there is such a big core Batman family that there hasn't been much room for those sort of more low-key, street-level supporting characters. And she's delivered that largely herself in Detective Comics. So this, alongside Catwoman, have been my two favorite Fear State tie-in books. Again, because they've done a good job sticking to the story they've already been telling in their books, but also bringing in the elements of Fear State to help elevate their own stories rather than just ape off of what Fear State had going on to begin with. Now, as for the backup story, Foundations, this is written by Stephanie Phillips with David Lapham on art. I know he is also on the art for the Detective Comics Annual, so I'm assuming that's going to tie into this Foundations prelude. And basically we're just continuing to set up the idea that we're building an Arkham Tower in the heart of the city. Batman sees this old man on the roof who is sensing impending doom, that the Arkham building is cursed, and it's a bad idea to build this place. It has this strong sort of Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Friday the 13th vibe to it, where the old man's warning you've got to go back, don't do what you're doing. So it made for kind of a fun little backup story with a quick pop in from Harley Quinn at the very end. Nothing super extraordinary, enough to get me intrigued, but ultimately just kind of an advertisement for what's coming up in Detective next month. All right, that's 3 more books down. I am done, finally, with last week's books. So I'm excited to dig into those annuals starting tomorrow and start cranking out those reviews. But right now, I've got to go to bed. All right, guys, it's officially time. It's now Thursday night, and it's put up or shut up for this special double episode of This Week in Batman that I'm trying to get ready for Friday, at 6 p.m. So just a quick recap. I have got to read and review a whole chunk of annuals, but then I've also got a couple bonus titles waiting in the wings. These are the books that my wife picked up for me at my alternate comic book shop. We've got Fear State Omega. I'll probably read this one first because it wraps up Fear State. And then, because they had cover A, I did go ahead and tell her, grab me a copy of Gotham City Villains. This is a 100-page special, which means all told, we're looking at about 350 pages. I have a little bit of leeway because, thank goodness, I've actually got the day off tomorrow. But my plan is to get everything read and reviewed tonight. So I only have to worry about editing because I do have a lot of other stuff going on tomorrow. So no more time for dilly-dallying. I'm going to kick back, crack open Fear State Omega, and let you know what I thought about this most current week of Batman books. Okay, so I've been working through annuals, and I had a realization, which is Batman, the 2021 annual, is the conclusion to the backup story that ran in Batman through issues 107 through 111 or 12. I did not read those at the time because I read the first couple, was really confused, knew it was going to be concluded in the annual, and so I was just like, I'll just read it all at the end. So now I got to read it all. So in addition to all these books I got to read, now I've got 5 more issues of Batman backup stories to get through. I am running really short on time. It's getting late, but I have a secret weapon. Okay, I'm ready. The secret weapon is you. Did you hear my intro? What's that? So did you finish the book?
I did finish the book today.
Well, minutia wife, why don't you tell me about... Well, actually, let's talk a little bit about your comics. So, like, what are your favorite comics?
Saga.
Okay.
And I started with Fables.
Okay.
And probably just a lot of stereotypically girly comics.
Okay.
Squee.
Arguable.
Street Squee.
Oh, okay.
Back in the day.
Got it.
Yeah.
So, with that as your background, what did you think of Gotham City Villains? I'm going to just show some internal panels of this for everyone watching while you talk.
Well, I love a human relation story in a superhero book.
Okay.
And a lot of these little mini-sodes really just add the human face to the villain, which is always fun.
Is there an example?
The Moth.
Killer Moth?
Killer Moth.
Ooh, okay. I like Killer Moth.
And it's really just a little, like, it's one of the shorter ones. It's like 4 or 5 pages.
Okay.
And it's basically like...
There's some good art in here, by the way.
Oh, yeah. The art was very cool. That was definitely what made me crack it open when I picked it up for you.
Okay.
So the Killer Moth story is basically just a little, like, hey, I'm just a regular billionaire who tried to compete with the Batman. And in the end, I realized that not only did that hurt a lot, but I'm happier just being at home with my cat. And
Okay.
I like to see, like, Batman in his sweatpants, you know, like,
Oh, okay.
like, you know, Catwoman in her, like, lazy t-shirt outfit, you know. The Penguin Catwoman romance in this is distressing.
And that's the one written by Danny DeVito, is that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
It definitely, he definitely puts his sheen on the Penguin. It's a sweet story that I don't want to ruin for you guys, but
Okay, that's fine. I'll read it eventually.
You
Just
will.
not in time for this video to come out.
you will.
Did you fall asleep during this?
Yes, but that was not the book's fault.
Okay.
It's not the book's fault.
As someone who doesn't read Batman, you followed it, you understood it, and you were able to get a kick out of it.
Yeah.
Yes or no? Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay.
And each one has a little, like, this is where it'll be continued, so if I was interested, I could
Interesting. Okay.
continue on that.
So then, do you know why this book exists?
No idea.
So last year they did, or a couple of years ago, last year, I think it was last year, they did a Joker anniversary issue because it was the Joker's 80th anniversary of existing.
Oh.
And so this year, all of these villains here have anniversaries.
Oh, that's cool.
So
Okay.
you've got Mad Hatter, Poison Ivy, Killer Moth, Red Hood, Penguin, Scarecrow, and Ra's al Ghul.
Well, that explains why the Killer Moth and the Mad Hatter were even in here, because I was like, weird. I've never, read about them really before.
So what do you think the odds are that all of these have a relevant anniversary and not just 42nd anniversary of this character?
What do I think the odds are?
Yeah.
I don't know, probably pretty slim, because they maybe had to grasp a little bit, unless they were all created in the same
They were not.
year or
I know
two.
they were not. Yeah.
Yeah, no, they're probably pretty stretched thin, I
Do you
guess.
think they were all created in December?
Yeah.
Of what the respective year they came out?
1960 or whatever
And-
year we're talking about. It would be cool.
Cash grab. Just gonna say this is a cash grab. I'm pretty excited to read it because the art is pretty sweet.
You know what? It did grab your cash, so.
But it did grab my cash.
It certainly did.
Along with all the books this week, grab my cash.
Yeah.
This is working pretty well, actually. Hey, Minutia Cat, will you review this issue of Batman Annual for me? It's only 48 pages. Do you have time? No? Are you sure? You're not helpful. There's a reason I married Minutia Woman over Minutia Cat. Alright, so as you can see, we've been relegated to the basement again. Minutia wife had to go to bed. We are now into the late night hours. It's a little after midnight, and I finally finished reading through all of the books. To be honest, I kind of planned on actually doing the reviews tomorrow in the morning before getting my editing done and just trying to fit everything into my day. But I was actually really excited to talk about these because I had a lot of fun reading the annuals this year, which is not something that happens that often anymore, to be honest. So before getting into the annuals, I'll just do a quick final word on James Tynion's farewell issue to Batman Fear State Omega. Basically a book that puts a really nice bow on the whole Tynion run on Batman. In this issue, you have a lot of different artists, and basically Scarecrow is being transported to this new Arkham Tower place that they've been setting up in Foundations, and his goons get the drop on the vehicle he's being transported in, and he thinks he's about to get away, only to find out that Batman was one step ahead of him, and Batman personally delivers him to this new mental facility. And throughout it, Scarecrow is just kind of picking holes in Batman and his mission. And in the course of them arguing, you get to kind of find out what happens to Miracle Molly in the fallout after Fear State. You get to find out what's next for Peacekeeper 1 and what happened to Simon Saint and his company. You get a little additional follow-up with Harley Quinn, Ivy, and Catwoman. And then at the end of the issue, you get a little bit of a wrap-up where Clown Hunter is set up with Ghostmaker to continue his training and sort of become his new sidekick. All in all, it was bittersweet. It was well written, and it did a good job paying off a lot of these different characters that Tynion is now saying farewell to. To a certain degree, these characters are kind of put on ice, which I think is a good thing because they're not going to be able to do service to all of these characters at once. It was something that Tynion, I felt like, struggled a lot, especially during the Fear State event, to do. So now they're kind of all in their places and we can revisit them in time. Different writers can trot them out when it makes sense for their story. And all in all, I feel like after reading this, I'm very pleased with where Tynion's leaving off, in the sense that he really has introduced a lot of new things, and there's a lot of interesting moving parts now that can just breathe some fresh life into future Batman books if future writers can find the right way to use these new characters. As I've said in prior weeks, I'm really excited to see what happens with Mariko Molly down the road, and I'm always praising the Punchline character and what they've been doing with her. So a lot of cool threads to pull on in the future. I'm pretty satisfied with this final issue from Tinian. So definitely recommend picking this up. If you've been reading the main Fear State event, you have to read it, I would say. But if you want just kind of a roadmap of what happened to all these different characters, just so you have it in your back pocket for future books, you could probably pick this up and just read it on its own, and it's possibly going to be a prelude to the next year's worth of stories in Batman. At the very end of this, we did also get a surprise appearance from Dr. Chase Meridian, which I thought was interesting. I believe, yes, this is her right here. She looks different than she did when she was first introduced in the comics. Obviously, this is a character from Batman Forever that showed up in the comics, I think in Legends of the Dark Knight, I think that was volume 2, several years ago now. Now she looks a little bit closer to kind of the Nicole Kidman version of Chase Meridian. But basically, Chase Meridian is heading up this new hospital, it sounds like. So she's going to have a pretty major part to play in upcoming Detective Comics ventures with Mariko Tamaki. So that was kind of cool to see. I'm actually pretty excited about that. And not actually the only issue this week that Chase Meridian appeared in, too. Okay, so that leaves us with the 5 annuals, and I ordered these ones least favorite to most favorite, because some were not so great, and some of them were genuinely fantastic. So I just want to call those out along the way. There were good things and bad things in all of them, to be honest, so your mileage may vary. If you're someone who's been really enjoying Ghostmaker, this will probably rank higher on your list. For me, it was right at the bottom because I don't care about the Ghostmaker character, and that is Batman the 2021 Annual. And ultimately there's nothing wrong with this. If you like Ghostmaker, this book is probably going to be really satisfying. I just don't get this character. He just doesn't really do anything for me. I think this art style is pretty impressive. But the art style also isn't really for me. It just doesn't appeal to me. I can recognize that it's well done, but I also recognize that it's not for me. I can't remember who it was. I feel bad. But someone down in the comments on one of my videos said, Ghostmaker basically is just DC trying to go after the Fortnite crowd, and now I kind of can't see anything else. And kind of the chaos action of this book really reinforced that vibe to me. This is sold as the big Ghostmaker saga. Having gone through and read and reread 107 through 112 or 107 through 111. I can't remember. I forgot to write that down. Basically, in that you get an instant host of supervillains that Ghostmaker is going to go up against, and it's basically just each of them taking turns telling their stories about how awesome Ghostmaker is and how they all got defeated by him. So it's intended to introduce how much of a badass that Ghostmaker is, but then on the same token, establish all of these villainous characters. And frankly, to me, it was just too rushed and wasn't enough to really get me invested. And so by the time you get to this issue, it's the big throwdown between all these characters. Despite the fact that I had all this supplemental material to read going into this book, the book itself didn't actually take that long to read because it's really just a lot of this. A lot of big fight, double-page spreads. And that's kind of it. So, if this is your thing, if you love Ghostmaker, go check this out. You're going to love it. If you're reading Batman and you don't care about Ghostmaker, I question that this annual is even really worth a pickup. So the next 2 annuals were kind of a toss-up. I had one at second to the bottom, and then I flipped it with the other one and went back and forth and back and forth. So these next 2 you can more or less consider a tie. But my final placement, I think I'm going to put Joker up next, which is a bummer. I love Joker as an ongoing series. I've heard some people aren't as down with it as I have been, but I really enjoy the slow burn of it. It's a lot of fun. This issue just left me cold. It's got Francisco Francavilla on art, which of course is always welcome, although to be honest, I don't think that this is his best work. And he did, I can't remember if it was even an issue of the Joker already, or if it was a different story. I just can't remember. I've been reading too much Batman, go figure. But I remember thinking at the time that that wasn't my favorite Francavilla art either, and I'm not quite sure why it is. I mean, it's not bad, and I do like Francisco Francavilla a lot. This just doesn't quite work for me. It's Francisco Francavilla sometimes can be like Chris Samney, where it's like the art just fits the tone perfectly, and then there are other times where it just doesn't. And for some reason, this one didn't for me, which is weird. Like, he should be able to bang a book like this out of the park. And I don't know. It doesn't matter. You can look at the art and judge for yourself and let me know if I'm an idiot down in the comments. The reason why this ultimately was second to bottom was because this just felt like a repeat. So we had a flashback issue with Jim Gordon having this early this early confrontation with Joker, and how it affects him and his family and all that kind of stuff. This issue hits on a lot of similar beats, and especially if that was an issue illustrated by Francisco Francavilla, which I'm kind of thinking that is the issue. This just feels like the same thing again. You get Jim Gordon earlier in his career dealing with this Joker prank that he's playing on them, and it's while he's in the middle of trying to clean out the corruption in the Gotham City Police Department. He's estranged with his wife because he's obsessed with the Joker and all that kind of stuff. The one thing that's kind of interesting about this particular issue is that this is written in the context that he knew Barbara Gordon was Batgirl, which we found out way back in Joker War, or like one of the tie-ins for that. And so now that retcon is kind of in full force here, where it's never outwardly spoken, but he makes decisions that make it clear he knows by this point that Batgirl is actually Barbara Gordon. So that is interesting to see. I'm still kind of questioning the logic of that retcon, but I'm willing to roll with it. It's fine if they want to do a spell with that. If it doesn't work, they'll just retcon it out again later. So whatever, that's fine. As I'm leafing through this again, I'm reminded that this book did have some actually pretty funny stuff in it that kind of made it worth the price of admission. There's a pretty major subplot in which Catman is hired by Riddler, and there's a lot of really funny, entertaining dialogue kind of taking the piss out of Catman, which is pretty fun. I don't know that it is as good as, like, Secret 6 Days, but there was some good stuff in there about that, too. So that made it a little bit fun. Now I'm kind of questioning if this should have actually been third from the bottom pick as opposed to my second, but too late. It's already done. So eking out Joker by just a little bit is the Robin 2021 Annual. Another book where, you know, the main monthly series, I'm always praising it. I praised it earlier in this video, actually, because that was on last week's books that I just reviewed a couple nights ago now, or last night. I don't even remember. I think it was last night. The reason this is just kind of middle of the road is partly just because I'm annoyed with the idea of this. Because this book takes place before the events of Robin number 6. And I'm just, in a week where we got all of these annuals at the same time, I'm just questioning why this didn't come out around the time of Robin number 5. Like, you got me, I have no idea. Basically, this issue serves to just kind of flesh out the characters that are on Lazarus Island with Damian. Probably the highlight is this Flatline story in which we find out kind of her secret origin and a little bit more about how her powers work. All stuff that probably would have been helpful and more interesting if we had gotten it earlier in the Robin arc. But now that we're on issue 8 going on issue 9, a lot of this book just kind of felt unnecessary. What this has over the Joker is, to be honest, I like the art better. It just was more in keeping with the ongoing Robin monthly story, so it was a little less jarring. And then it did have a lot of humor in it, which I praised some of the humor in Joker. This actually had more. So, like, there's a whole section here with Lord Deathman that had me laughing out loud kind of multiple times throughout it. So that was a lot of fun. And then we got to dig in a little bit more to how Connor Hawke ended up on this island. And that made for some interesting reading as well. As someone who doesn't really know, like, I've heard what's been going on with Connor Hawke lately, but, you know, I haven't actually read those comics. So this was kind of helpful, providing a little bit of context. So that was good. Now, the last thing I'll say about this book is there is an epilogue. So as much as this is just filler, the epilogue, couple of pages, does leave some important hints as to the future of where we're headed. So in the epilogue, we go back to this weird version of Ra's al Ghul that I was complaining about back in issue 4 or 5 whenever he showed up on the scene. And he has an interaction with Talia al Ghul, who needs to talk to her father, and there's a heavy implication at the end of this that there is a major storyline coming up that's going to be in Batman, Robin, and Deathstroke Incorporated. So it teases an event called Shadow War, presumably the war between the League of Shadows and the League of Assassins, although I guess I'm not sure, but that seems to be what they're building up to, which is going to come in 2022. So that might be kind of interesting and maybe worth your time, but since you saw it here, you're welcome. I just saved you $6. All right, so my top 2 books were both really, really good reads, but there is a clear winner here, and there is a clear runner-up. So the runner-up to my favorite 2021 annual this week is Nightwing, and this is really good. You might even say it's great. It is a classic annual that, like, it's just a big story, stands on its own. You can just sit down, read it for what it is. As long as you know who Nightwing and Jason Todd are, you're going to be able to get a lot of enjoyment out of this read. Basically, in this story, Jason Todd is set up for a murder. It's kind of like a typical Red Hood story setup, which is a little underwhelming, because this just seems like how every Red Hood story starts when he's going to be interacting with Nightwing or Batman. But regardless, that's the setup. The question is, how does the story actually play out? And ultimately, you get a great little adventure between Nightwing and Red Hood that begins with them flashing back to an adventure they had when Jason Todd was still Robin. And then, as the issue continues on, we fast forward to the present day, where Nightwing and Red Hood get to team up and get to relive some of that old dynamic. So it was just a fun read, really entertaining if you like these characters. So then that leaves one annual left, and that is Batman Detective Comics, Mariko Tamaki's first annual. And this is a prelude to Shadows of the Bat, which is going to be a weekly Detective Comics event that is going to be following this whole Arkham Tower thing they've been setting up in the backup story for Batman, and then now further set up in this. Now, having said that, if you're not reading Batman or you're not interested in the Shadows of the Bat story, this story does work completely on its own, and I highly recommend picking it up because there is just so much to like in this book. This is another one where we see characters across multiple time periods, but in this one it bounces back and forth quite a bit more. You start the story with Bruce Wayne, Thomas, and Martha Wayne out getting ice cream, and when a serial killer gets thrown out the window, Thomas Wayne chooses to save that person, which is sort of your typical altruistic Thomas Wayne type story. Where it gets interesting is this is now a serial killer that is still haunting Gotham City and is now a problem that Batman has to deal with. And there's a lot of dialogue in this around what does it really mean to help someone? Does this guy need to be punished, or does this guy need help? And it does a good job kind of playing all of these different perspectives off of each other. And they did it in a really nuanced and intelligent way, in my opinion. Now, that in and of itself wouldn't necessarily make this like the best book ever, but I found that Mariko Tamaki's writing of Dick Grayson as Nightwing interacting with Bruce Wayne as Batman in this really took me back to classic Dick Grayson Batman interactions. I think more so than I felt in a long time. And I'm not exactly sure why that is. It's really difficult to quantify it, but you know it when you see it. There's a ton of detective work in this, which is great. You don't get to see Batman play the detective very often. And so you kind of get this great combination of cutting back and forth between what's going on with Batman and the serial killer when he's an adult versus Bruce Wayne, his father, and the serial killer when he's young. Where his father's dedication to medicine is ultimately very much opposed to Batman's solution to crime and mental illness. And then to top it all off, just really well drawn characters with Batman and Nightwing. So, yeah, I mean, I ate this book up. This book really stood out to me. I'd be really curious to know if you guys have the same reaction that I do, because, like, at the end of the day, like, I guess it's just another setup for Shadows of the Bat. And, by the way, I mentioned earlier that Chase Meridian is going to make another cameo appearance in a Batman book this week. It's at the end of this one, when Bruce Wayne puts this serial killer in her care at the end to try and help him. For me, it was just firing on all cylinders and really made my night and made me super excited to record this video and tell you guys about it. So if you're sleeping on this, go check it out. $5.99, it's expensive, I know, but I hope you give it a read, and I hope it's a recommendation you find worthy of the money spent.
Typically, I try to do my This Week in Batman on Tuesdays. This week, you're going to get it on Friday.
Hey everyone, Minutia Minute here. Just finished editing this week's movie rewind video.